It is my goal to expose and eliminate the cons, the gimmicks, the shell games, and the smoke and mirror snow jobs involved in this industry.
Call or click 404 Eclipse.
Hello again, it's Reggie Moon with Eclipse, USA and Associates, brokered by eXp. So watch this. You've got a contract and you've been under contract for a week or so. And then one of the agents in the deal says, hey, the binding date was never filled out. So and it can go either way, which side fills out the binding date. Every company has a policy on who fills out the binding date. It's the last one to sign. That's not always true. What if the last one signs, but the one waiting on signatures doesn't get anything back for 3 days? It's the person that gets it back after everybody's signed. That's the answer. Who fills in the binding date? But that's not what we're talking about. But sometimes you'll have a contract where somebody dropped the ball and the binding date was not filled out. People say, oh, just backdate it. Okay, well, it's not that easy sometimes, because let's say someone had a 10-day inspection period. And let's say on day 8, somebody figures out, hey, we never figured out the binding date. We never put it down here. Let me cut back and come backwards a little bit. When it comes to litigation and lawsuits and talking to a judge, there's really not a precedent about the binding date not being filled out. It hasn't been ruled on. It hasn't happened yet. So when that does happen, you can solve it agent to agent, client to client. You can solve it with the email that came through, with the email chain, the email thread, right? You can solve it. But the problem that it causes is typically it can break something that can't be fixed. And it's something like this. As you know, the binding date, as soon as the contract is binding, 3 clocks start ticking. The due diligence period, let's say it's 10 days. The financing contingency, that clock is also ticking. Tick, tick, tick. You got the 10-day due diligence. You got a 12-day financing contingency. Some financing types have an appraisal contingency. And it's time sensitive depending on the financing type. Like FHA, it doesn't matter. Conventional, it does. There's a clock ticking on the appraisal contingency. Why does that matter? Well, if you got the clocks ticking, well, when does that stop? When does that clock, when do they hit the stopwatch to start the clock? It starts at the binding date. So if you got a 10-day inspection period, that 10-day clock started when you went binding. So the binding date matters. But is it a deal breaker? Well, you could have someone say, hey, I terminated on day 12. Well, you only had 10 days. Well, we never got the binding date. We never officially knew when we were binding. What do you mean? I'm trying to terminate and my due diligence period is over. According to what? Then you'll have an earnest money dispute. The whole thing, it's better. I was just about to say, the whole thing can be prevented if agents will come together and not act like attorneys and solve it with, hey, this is when I emailed it to you and you said you got it. Hey, congratulations, confetti falling from the sky. Everybody's happy. We're under contract. People put it on social media. Let's start with that date. Let's say that's when the binding date was. It's very easy to solve. In fact, it's easier to solve that than the problems that it causes if you don't solve it. That's it. Why not just solve it? Why not huddle up and say, this is what we're going to call the binding date? Okay, you heard it here first. It's Reggie Moon with Eclipse, USA and Associates, brokered by eXp. We'll talk soon. Thanks.